Let's talk about while loops. While loops are very similar to for loops, except you have a lot more control, but you also have to do things a little bit differently. You have to actually provide more information and make sure that that information is there. If you use a for loop, for example, we'll see that a little bit later on in this exercise again, you see that you have to set certain things in order for your for loop to work correctly, otherwise you won't have the right syntax. While loops, if you don't do things correctly, you might never know that things aren't working until you actually see something that's not working in your code. So it actually won't produce a syntax error or something like that. It just won't work right for you, and it could possibly be an infinite loop, which is just going to go on forever. Well, with a for loop, we know that we have to set up a initial value. We have to have an initial value here. $value is equal to 1. That's our initializer, just like the for loop, but we do it outside of the while. And then we have the while statement. And instead of all that other added stuff that we put on the for loop, we just have our testing condition, just like an if statement. So a while loop is closer to an if statement. Very, very powerful. It's like an if statement that can execute again and again and again until the condition is no longer met. So as long as it's true, it'll just keep going on and on and on and on, like the Energizer Bunny. It's just going to keep going. So $value is less than or equal to 3. Okay. If it is, do this. Now, we have to increment ourselves. $value plus plus needs to be executed at the end of the while statement before it comes back and tests again. Otherwise, this will go on forever. So we have that there. But we have the added freedom of putting that wherever we want to, as long as it's in that loop and as long as it's going to increment the value and get it closer to the finishing point. We could even have statements that come afterwards. So you have that freedom to put the statement wherever you want to. Really powerful, really powerful. I use while loops much more than I use for loops because you're dealing with databases, and you'll see that. You'll see different ways to work with databases. PHP is very powerful for that. And I just find it a lot easier to use while loops than for loops, but it's really up to your needs. Now we have an alternative way. Same thing, except it's easier to understand. It's a lot easier to understand for beginner programmers or people who are used to working with basic languages. Instead of the curly braces, we have a colon, and then at the end, where all the statements are there that are going to be executed within this block of code, we have an end, while, and a semicolon. So that's different than what we've seen so far, because we're not used to that at the end of our little blocks of code. But if you want to use this syntax, by all means, use it, if it makes things better for you. Easier to understand. But once you get used to the curly braces, they're everywhere, and you'll see that you can understand Java, JavaScript, C#, all different languages. When you begin to start to go back to the basic way and doing things that